Control is a philosophy of pest management outlining a decision-making process aimed at achieving sustainable reductions in pest populations and their growth and their potential for growth. Successful IPM programs incorporate judicious applications of control methods, including but not limited to sanitation, habitat modification, exclusion, repellents, and pesticides. All right, so it's not just spray and pray, okay? Spray and pray is what was done back in the 50s, 60s, and maybe early 70s, all right? They just sprayed a heck of a lot of stuff, all right? And didn't think about doing a lot of these IPM approaches that don't involve the use of pesticide. Today, almost for everything, so much emphasis is based on other things that are not involving pesticides, like what? Limiting the amount of pests to get in by exclusion, habitat modification on the outside, not storing firewood piles on the ground right next to the house, having it off the ground, all right, and away from the house. Exclusion, the use of repellents, and notice and pesticides it mentioned. All right, the definition of green pest management, all right, it can best be defined as a service that employs an integrated pest management approach while utilizing fewer of the Earth's resources as part of a larger effort to reduce human impacts on the environment. All right, maybe not mining as many things that come from the Earth to use for pest control. All right, now let's look at the types of pesticides. You need to know those. And believe me, these will be on the test, all right? A lot of different types. All right, botanicals are plant-derived. This is the one that will be on the test, probably. Pyrethrum. It's made from the what? The petals of a chrysanthemum plant grown in Africa. All right? It's an ingredient of a lot of our flushing agents, PT565 plus XL, and fogging compounds, or ULD, or ULD space sprays. All right? Pyrethrum. All right? Now, old discontinued products, you don't probably need to know these, but rotenone, red squill, and nicotine. All right? And some of these newer products you might need to know. They're the oils that come from plants. Peppermint oil, clove oil, citron oil, lavender oil, thyme oil, rosemary oil. Man, all right? Some of these smell a lot, and they smell pretty good to most people, but not to everybody necessarily. All right? These are botanicals. Now, the ones that come from the earth, these are the minerals. The desicants, and that would be which? Well, you remember?
Silic acid.
Silica gel, silica aerogel, and diatomaceous earth. These are the two. And silica gel is an ingredient of Drione, Tridine, and Simex A. All right? Stomach poisons. That would be the borates or boric acid. All right? And these are ingredients in our baits. And treat wood with borates, Timbor and Boracare, that controls both wood decay fungi, and certainly controls wood boring beetles. All right, so these you need to know. All right, there'll be questions on the exam over. Now, chlorinated hydrocarbons. Hopefully you won't need to know the names of these, but these were ones that I grew up with, certainly, but then not a lot older than you are. So the termiticides we used, chlordane, heptachlor, aldrin, and dieldrin, and even lindane, okay? How about DDT and BHC? Lindane was used for platypus beetles. DDT was used as a tracking powder for mice. But all these products are no longer used in the United States. They're not registered by EPA any longer. They're still used in some countries occasionally when there's a bad problem, but not in the United States. All right? So one time they were used both in household pest control and for agricultural pests in the United States, and especially for ants and for termites, they were used a lot. But even for fleas inside, lindane was used to spray rugs. And lindane, again, got a long life. They have a strong, long residual life, okay? All right, now, from 73 to 88, only these products at the very top were used as termiticides. on structures. It wasn't used for any other use. But in middle, I think June of '88, that use was canceled. So again, these are no longer used today. Why are they important? They had a long residual life, and they're no longer registered. Why? Because they could cause the thinning of eggshells of predatory birds like hawks and eagles. And it was impacting them. The numbers were going down in the 50s, 60s, and finally they decided to do something about it. All right? So chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides have a long residual life. That's the one big advantage they have. But a disadvantage is they impacted predatory birds and cut their numbers down because their eggshells were too thin and they cracked too easily. Organophosphates. Well, we use very few of these today. I remember these by the 3Ds and the 3 smelly ones and the one that wasn't worth a damn. Okay? Now, the 3Ds, Dursban, diazonine, and DVP. Now, the one that's still registered, believe it or not, are these two. DVP, it's registered. It's in Nuvam Pro Strips today. Okay? Dursban, hey, it's still registered in Georgia. It's what? Both of these are what? Restricted use pesticides, DVP and Dursban in Georgia. If you want to see those products that are restricted use pesticide, just go to their website, the Georgia Department of Agriculture, and they list them. All right. Then I remember the 3 smelly ones. Orthane, which is acephate, still registered in Georgia. Malathion is not registered for pest control any longer. It's registered for ornamental and agricultural products only. Safratin, it's not registered at all. But these were ones that smelled a lot. And there was the one that didn't work worth a darn, and that was Prifon. It's no longer registered. It had a very short residual life, and it was used as a termiticide, and it just didn't have the longest residual. It didn't have the best residual, unfortunately. All right? All right. So we use very few of these. All right? The antidote for organophosphate poisoning is atropine. You should know that. It'll be a test question. All right? The antidote for organophosphate poisoning is atropine. All right. The carbamates. All right? Well, I just remember the 3 that I remember most is Phychem 7 and Bagon. All right? And those, guess what? These are no longer registered for structural pest control. So they could be on the exam. I hope not. Organophosphates were more toxic than carbamates. Carbamates were safer. Okay? But then they started developing synthetic pyrethroids. And synthetic pyrethroids are much safer than carbamates or organophosphates or chlorinated hydrocarbons. All right? So these aren't registered. The antidote to them was atropine plus 2-pan. Now, it's just an abbreviation for something, 2-pan. All right? Now, synthetic pyrethroids, here's a few of the many. All right? You don't need to know all the names of these, I'm sure. But you might recognize some. Bifentrin is what? Is Telstar, Biflex, permethrin. It's in Ultracide. Cypermethrin, that's Demon. Cyflutrin, that's Sidekick or Tempo 20WP. I'm sure you know a lot of these. Deltamethrin, Delta granules, there are a lot of different products. Okay? They all end in thrin, except a few of these like Esfenvaleri. But almost all of these, they're common names of the products, not the chemical names, or the trade name of the product, but the common names end in thrin. Hi. But Esfenvaleri doesn't. Then we have the glycoside insecticides. Abamectin is a naturally occurring fungus, and it's an ingredient of a lot of these baits that you've seen. All right. So, again, natural occurring fungus, glycoside, right? Insecticide. Then imidahydrozones. Well, that's a group of pesticides And hydromethanol is the active ingredient of some of these products. Okay, and so it's used in baits a good bit. All right, it's not the best bait, but it's okay, certainly. Then we have phenylpyrosols. They contain fipronil. All right, and it's an ingredient of a lot of products you may recognize. It's probably the best active ingredient that's available today. But it's not labeled for everything. Certainly it's labeled for termites, and it's labeled for some other uses as well. It's a non-repellent, okay? It's a non-repellent product. So the insects they're not repelled by it, and they don't know they're entering an area that's been treated by it, and they pick it up easy. All right? Next, we have the neonicotinoids. The imidacloprid is a non-repellent as well. And it's an ingredient of some termiticides and for some cockroach and fly bait. It's very good as a fly bait. The biggest problem with imidacloprid is it doesn't have a good residual life, so it's not very good for termite control. It'll kill quickly. It'll kill, certainly, just like fipronil products will. The only problem is it doesn't have a long residual. So you get breakdown and you get some lack of control as early as 2 years. So, personally, I wouldn't be a real fan of using imidacloprid for termite control, but for fly control, wow, it's fantastic. It kills flies in minutes. All right? Dinoterifan is another neonicotinoid. It's an ingredient of alpine products, and there are a bunch of alpine products for outside use, inside use, and some for flea control. These are also non-repellent. Remember, I'm telling you non-repellent is because non-repellent products, they're really good for social insects. Boy, so if you got ants, that's great. If you got termites, these are great, But you got to follow label directions, whatever the label for, obviously. Now you got those also that are non-repellents, that are pyrazole analogs. Chlorphenapure is an active ingredient in Phantom and SC, and it's one of the newer non-repellent pesticides. Then you have the oxidiene compounds, and doxacarb, is an active ingredient of Advion cockroach gel bait and Aerolon. So it's a non-repellent as well. Then we have the IGRs. The IGRs would be Gentrol, which Gentrol, the active ingredient is hydroprene. Precor, the active ingredient is called methoprene. Then we've got Nylar or Archer, the active ingredient is pyroproxifene. Then we have Taurus, no longer registered. You know why it wasn't registered? No longer registered? Mm-hmm. Guess what it said on its SDS? Mm-hmm. It said that if it gets into your eyes, it causes permanent blindness. Why would you ever give that to a service professional? Whoa. So they took it off the market. Okay. All right. Termiticide baits, IGRs. We've got hexaflumaron, which is active ingredient of Centricon products. And then novaflumaron, which is active ingredient of Centricon products, and especially Centricon Always Active, right, which contains like a plastic mixed with it that allows it to be inspected at a longer interval outside because it doesn't degrade as quickly. By the way, you might say mixed with plastic. How could it be better? Well, it'll last longer, and guess what? Termites eat the kind of plastic that it's mixed with, so that's good. Diflubenzuron is an ingredient of Xterra and Advanced, and then Novaluron is another one that is inspected on an annual basis, and that's called Trelona. All right, fumigants. You probably won't have a lot on fumigants, but methylbromide is a fumigant that's used for quarantine fumigation only. All right, it's no longer labeled for structural fumigation. All right, sulfurofluoride is an active ingredient of Vicane and Masterfume and Zythor. Those are 3 different compounds, and it's the only fumigant that can be used in structural fumigation today. mostly for things like what you might think of would be you're fumigating a structure because it has powder post beetles or house borers, drywood termites. But you can also fumigate it for a lot of insects that are listed on the label that are not wood-destroying organisms, like bedbugs, right? Like clothes moths, like carpet beetles. All right. Agricultural and commodity fumigants, sulfuryl fluoride has got a different label on it. It's called Profume, and it's used to control agricultural and commodities. Phostoxin and magtoxin are two solid pellets and tablets that can be used to control pests of agricultural commodities and commodity fumigants. Chlorpicrin, that's a fumigant, but it's actually a warning agent, right? And the low amount it's put out, it certainly makes people stay out of it, an area that's being fumigated, right? So it's used as a warning agent when structural fumigation is done. Never used with these agricultural and commodity fumigants. You couldn't use it on food. You could use it in a house when food's taken out or sealed. All right, calcium cyanide, no longer used today. I used calcium cyanide. Calcium cyanide was, was just a powder, and you applied it into burrows, rodent burrows, and it really made them come out certainly within a minute, and they'd end up dying. They breathed that, right? It's a powder that turned into a gas when it hit the right temperature and moisture, and boy, it was good on rodents, but it's no longer used today. Acute rodenticides, zinc phosphide, it's 2% bait and a 10% tracking powder. Bromethalin is an ingredient of vengeance, assault, and trounce, and it's a rodent bait. And then we have cholecalciferol, which is an ingredient of Quintox and Rampage, and it's a rodent bait. There are no antidotes for poisoning for an acute rodenticide. My personal opinion is I would never use them, okay, period. I don't believe the pest control companies should be using them. I'd be in favor of doing away with them. Why? Because there's no antidote. If a kid gets into it or a pet gets into it, it could die. It's just simple. But remember, acute rodenticides are what kind of a product? Not a general use. They're restricted use pesticides. So you could not apply this unless you were certified or you were a registered person and a certified operator was present at the site. These are following acute rodenticides were used in the past. Strychnine, it could kill a dog in 10 or 12 minutes. And red squill. 1080 could probably do it in less time than that. 1080 had an LD50 of 0.0677. Most of the products we apply today have high LD50s, 5,000 to 25,000 or more when we mix them according to the rate and apply them as an end-use product. So, wow, some of these older products, man, no wonder they were done away with. They didn't have a high degree of safety. There were no antidotes. All right. There are no antidotes for acute rodenticide poisoning. They're all restricted use pesticides, and the labels allow application only by a certified operator or a person under the direct supervision. But rules have changed, and they're no longer true. Effective 9/1/2017, the Commission has changed the rules in our state. Okay. And no uncertified person may lawfully apply under any circumstances any restricted use pesticide or state restricted pesticide use unless a certified operator is present at the application site at the time of application. The certified operator must hold certification in the appropriate operational category for which you're trying to kill the pest. So changes. Most of these acute rodenticides probably will go away, hopefully, right? Because guess what? If a company's got one certified operator and got 10 people, it can't be out with all those people applying it. It would limit its use. Today in Georgia, restricted use pesticide may not be applied by an uncertified person unless he or she is in the presence of a certified operator who is present at the site and time of application. All right, here's some of them. All right, look at this one. Top choice, Fipronil taurus granules, but there's others as well. And remember, if they're restricted, they'll have a restricted use at the very top and the front of the label. And it's blocked in with a heavy black line. It says restricted use only. Right? So if it's not applied with certified operator present, it's a violation of the law. So that registered employee couldn't apply it alone. And if he did, there'd be a big problem. I can assure you they wouldn't just simply send you a letter and say, don't do this again, here's a warning. They would bring you in for a hearing, and then there would be probably a significant fine. All right? They're not going to put you in jail, though. Maybe that's too much. But they certainly, it would result in a fine, suspension of a card or license, or additional training requirements for a registered employee. All right, now let's look at multiple feeding anticoagulants. They're called first-generation anticoagulants, and warfarin is one. That might be on the test, all right? And it's no longer a good product. Rodents are resistant to it. There are a lot of resistant populations that warfarin just won't kill them. That's not one I'd want to use. I wouldn't want to use any of these first-generation anticoagulants simply because it takes multiple feedings to end up killing them in anywhere from 3 to 10 days. All right? Difascinone, well, it's an ingredient of these products, chlorfascinone in this product, and Pival or Pivalin. The antidote is vitamin K1, so there is an antidote. The only reason I wouldn't want to use them is there is a second-generation anticoagulant that are called single feeding and not multiple feeding anticoagulants, and just one single feeding of a small amount ends up killing them within 3 to 7 days. All right, so there is an antidote, and the antidote is the same, vitamin K1. So these are the 4 single feeding anticoagulants, or called second generation anticoagulants, that take just a small amount for them to feed on, and they're dead. They just don't know it yet. They're going to die within 3 to 7 days, even if they never feed on it again. And Brodifacoum is one active ingredient of Talon and weather block, bromadiolone, an active ingredient of Mackey and contract, diphthiolone, an active ingredient of Generation and First Strike soft bait, and the difenicum, an active ingredient of Dikill and Multikill. The antidote is still vitamin K1. So there is an antidote. All right. Which classes of pesticide do the following pesticides belong? I'm going to go through these real quick. I'm sure you're not going to know most of these, but you need to know some of them for the exam. Believe me, because they're going to have some questions on. All right. Chlordane. Okay. Well, it's no longer registered, but what is it? It's a chlorinated hydrocarbon. All right. What about silica aerogel? Well, it's inorganic. It's a mineral. It's found in the earth. What about pyrethrum? Well, we know it's a plant-derived or botanical product. What about Gentrol? We know it's an IGR, right? An insect growth regulator. And what about difascinone? We know that's an anticoagulant rodenticide, all right? That's what's called a what? First generation or multiple dose anticoagulant, all right? Vicane, that's a fumigant, right? Structural fumigate only, all right? Difascinone, that's a organophosphate, one of the 3 Ds, 3 smelly ones, and the one that wasn't worth a damn. Diazinon, all right? Diazinon is an organophosphate. Bagon, Ficam 7 and Bagon. Ficam 7 and Bagon. Those are carbamates, all right? All right? Hexafluoron, all right? Well, hexafluoron is an IGR, isn't it? It's used for termite control, all right? Taro, it's boric acid, all right? Boric acid comes from the earth. It's an inorganic, a mineral, all right? And the next one, malathion. It's a smelly one, so it's one of the 3 Ds, the smelly ones, and one that wasn't worth a damn, and that was an organophosphate, all right? Malathion. Now what about Ficam? Ficam is a carbamate. Ficam 7 and Bagon are carbamates, all right? Nylar is an IGR, okay? Quintox. Quintox is an acute rodenticide, all right? And it's a restricted use pesticide. Warthane. It's a smelly one, so it's one of the three Ds, there's three smelly ones, and one that wasn't worth a damn. It's an organophosphate. Lindane, like chloridane, is a chlorinated hydrocarbon. It's no longer used. Vengeance. Vengeance, it's got ingredient bromethalin, right? Vengeance is an acute rodenticide. Tempo. Tempo is what? Cyfluthrine. Cyfluthrine is a synthetic pyrethroid. Synthetic pyrethroid. Avert. Avert gel is well, it was really a glycoside, but it's close enough to be a plant-derived. You could call it that. It's really called a glycoside insecticide. And Demon is, of course, a synthetic pyrethroid. All right? So, you get all of those? Well, here's some more. Which class of pesticide do FastCap and Onslaught, right, and Premise 75 and Premise imidacloprid belong to? Remember, they're neonicotinoids, okay? What class of pesticides do Termidor SC, HE, Termidor HP, HP2, Taurus SC? They all contain fipronil. What are they? They're a phenylpyrrosol. Which class of pesticides do Aerolite and Advion cockroach bait and Doxycard belong to? They're also, excuse me, it's not advancing, oxidine, right? What about hydromethanol, Max Force Complete granulate bait? That is what? A metahydrazone. And what about chlorphenapyr? Chlorphenapyr is a pyrrole or pyrazole analog. All right, now, let's look at some different formulations, all right? Pesticides are processed and or manufactured, made available to pest management professionals in many different product forms. These forms are often referred to